Primality is a proposed term which I'm using to try to define a response to the current proliferation of ceramics and clay-based work in contemporary art. The need for this term arose in reaction to what I perceived as amorphous assumptions made by many contemporary artists and writers based on the idea of clay's mystique, which crystallises in the overuse of words such as magic, connection, innocence, and immediacy, and in a common look in the art world in artworks, I should say, of material and abject lumpiness. Primality describes a condition in which artists seem to be attempting a genuine return to something more fundamental and primal, and to be interested in issues such as primitivism and authenticity and materiality and matter, but often they turn out not to dig too deep and instead rely too easily on the magical, mythical cliches about clay. I propose the term primality to put these issues into question and ask how real the current vogue for clay is. Is it a fad about a return to the earth? Is primality a condition in which it is assumed that clay automatically provides access to deeper levels of experience? Is clay really magical? Is there real interest in the conditions and histories of the discipline of ceramics, or are artists just interested in some clay time? A return to infantile play, a fun-filled getaway from the stresses and strains of the art world. In this paper, I look at some recent examples of ceramics, clay-based art and writing to question whether artists and writers rely on easy assumptions about clay. First, I want to briefly discuss the Australian painter Ben Quilty, who has recently made a foray into porcelain. In the latest edition of the Journal of Australian Ceramics, Quilty gives an interview to promote his new ceramic sculptures, and he gets excited about, quote, the magic of actually using your hands to create an object. That immediacy and physicality, leaving your fingerprints, unquote. I suppose that the drooping nose is intended by the artist to be a comment on materiality and the property of clay to be elastic in its raw state and transformed into a permanent hard state after vitrification. In his interview, Quilty also says, clay is a fundamental medium for an artist, although I've never actually fired anything. His work is mostly done by expert ceramicists who, apart from the modelling of the face, create the composite, make the mould, and glaze and fire the piece. The question is, are we to take him seriously, or is he talking in cliches and exploiting a fashion when he speaks in wonderment about his discovery of hand-making objects out of clay? In the context of the Journal of Australian Ceramics, is speaking about magic and fingerprints interesting to a readership of skilled ceramicists? Does he think that ceramics is a terra nullius and he has discovered fingerprints and the magic of clay? Does Quilty realise how prevalent and overused these concepts are? On one hand, an exhibition at the Danish Holdegard Museum in 2011, which included the Chinese artist Ai Weiwei and former winner of the Turner Prize, English ceramicist and artist Grayson Perry, which was entitled The Magic of Clay, Ceramics and Contemporary Art. In his foreword to the catalogue, Holdegard director Mad Damsbo says, we all know the magical fascination of a lump of wet clay, and essentially clay is for playing with. On the other hand, community organisations and children's education love the concept of magic too. As well as being a latecomer to the discovery of the magic of clay, Quilty is also not the first to produce fingerprints. For many years, American artist Sterling Ruby has made primitive ceramics such as his ashtray series as part of a multidisciplinary practice. Ruby says he was inspired to make ceramics after attending evening classes in the 1990s, where he discovered to his disbelief that clay does give people an innate and unfettered sensibility. I loved it. You can see the similarities between the deliberately unsophisticated technique of Ruby's work, which foregrounds the finger markings, and the low skill of the magic of clay art class sign, where the artist shies away from full expression by trying to smooth out the lumpiness and make things nicer. With the associations of low craft and humanistic ideas about expression, it's not hard to understand the challenges Ruby experienced pursuing the idea of unmediated expression in the context of his postmodernist art school training. Here is a ceramic work by Australian-Japanese ceramicist Mitsui Shoji, another simple platter made with deep finger markings. Given these connections between the amateur sign maker, Ruby, and Shoji, it's interesting to wonder if this commonality between such divergent artists does actually indicate the existence of a primal and universal response to clay, as Ruby suggests, and which others rely on. Fingerprints in clay feature prominently in the work of contemporary Swiss artist Urs Fischer, whose Untitled Big Clay No. 3 is a giant digital enlargement in aluminium of a lump of clay, a lump of squished clay. A joke on subjectivity, authorship, and the heroic tradition of Western sculpture, which also happens to look a lot like the ancient Greek winged victory of Samothrace, which supports the interpretation of Fischer's work as historical critique. Notice how the fingerprints and the folds in the clay echo the marble draperies, perhaps referring to the traditional use of clay maquettes in sculpture. Fischer's installation, yes, exclamation mark, missing there, I'm sorry, at the Los Angeles Museum of Contemporary Art in 2013 was constructed in a free-for-all by the artist and 1,500 volunteers using 300 tonnes of clay and endless finger markings, and has been described by Bryce Couriger on Tate blogs in terms of magic and reconnection. He says, "The whole thing is hugely cheering and exerts a magical, even hypnotic attraction. One gains a quite physical idea of a joyful experience, of earthbound sensual making, and the longing to overcome alienation and connect with the surge of life." Although I've been taking quotes out of the context of more extensive texts and have been very selective in my examples, nevertheless, it seems to me that current ceramics and clay-based art and writing rely on the idea of primality, the amorphous and lazy assumption that clay has magical properties that provide faster access to authenticity, reconnection, and depth. The currency of primality is further exemplified by Australian curator and writer Glenn Barclay's article, "So Hot Right Now?" Contemporary Ceramics and Contemporary Art in Art in Australia magazine, issue 51.4 of this year. Barclay cites the 2013 Venice Biennale, the Encyclopedic Palace, curated by, I'll practice this, does anyone know? Massimiliano Gioni, as a milestone for ceramics, saying this curator privileged art making of an obsessive, humble, and genuine kind over the increasingly cynical and market-driven spectacle art that we have come to associate with fairs and mega exhibitions. Barclay assumes that ceramics and crafted art are humble mediums that will always operate that way. But I suggest that ceramics and clay art can equally be cynical and market-driven. Barclay is maybe being uncritical and making his assumption because fashion is so pervasive in art, and humility could just as easily be a cynical fashion. There's no doubt an argument can be made that clay and ceramics in contemporary art is a fashion in the negative sense. In my paper, Slaves of the Art World, delivered at this conference in 2012, I pointed out numerous current fashions in art. I called them formats because, as in the pop music industry where songs must fit radio formats, in art you need to produce work in particular current formats in order for them to be taken seriously and slotted into the art system. I pointed out formats such as shelves, tables, and ceramics sub-formats such as Italian painter Giorgio Morandi-inspired still life groupings, which have come down to us via Australian ceramicist Gwen Hanson-Piggott. Recently, Melbourne painter Angela Brennan exhibited these ceramics in the Melbourne Now exhibition. They are a spread-out Morandi-Piggott-esque arrangement of vessels on trestle tables. The work brings together several sub-formats in a super fashion ensemble of ceramics, craft, anti-craft, the handmade, the de-skilled, the figurative, lumpiness, distortion, expressivity, still life, Morandi, tables, trestle legs, a certain primal primitiveness and historical reference, in this case to Bronze Age Cypriot and Hagelash ceramic vessels. Barclay discusses Brennan in his 2014 Art and article, saying her ceramics possess an innocence that can come only from fresh eyes and the discovery of a new material, unquote. Innocence is a concept about purity based on the assumption that there's a pure exterior to the world, from where sometimes its essence might seep through to charm us on this side. If you don't believe there's an outside, is it possible to believe that innocence can exist in today's art world? Is this purity we see before us? Or is it just nice, charming work framed with marketing speak about innocence aimed at producing novelty for curators, collectors, and public? Taking up Oliver's point about cynicism from earlier. Whether it's true or not that Brennan's ceramics are innocent, the word's use indicates an attempt to assemble a language to describe and elaborate current ceramics as a primal kind of phenomenon. But wouldn't it be preferable to label this work with the term primality, to adjust it and indicate that this assertion is in question? Another Melbourne ceramics artist discussed by Barclay in his article is Brendan Huntley. Huntley's work is more sombre in palette, but very similar to Brennan's in terms of scale, loose, spontaneous construction and decoration, and spread out Morandi-esque arrangements and a primitivizing look. Barclay notes, as others have, that Huntley's mother is a potter, and Huntley has worked with clay since he was a child. I suggest these facts are possibly given to guarantee his authenticity and to head off the negative suggestion of fashion. Huntley has said, "I guess when you make something, it's like the universe is working through you. Out your hands, out your mind, and into the clay or onto the paper. The relationship with clay as a material itself is extremely important too. It goes way further than trying to analyse what a piece of work means. The energy involved in working with clay is a pretty awesome experience," unquote. This position, which privileges an earnest and fundamental experience of matter and energy, is possibly influenced by Huntley's mother's knowledge of studio pottery founder Bernard Leach's ideas about what makes a good pot. In 1975, late in his career, Leach wrote that sincerity is what matters. And according to the degree in which the vital force of the potter and that of his culture behind him flow through the processes of making, the resulting pot will have life in it or not, unquote. Through this vitalist commonality with Leach, Huntley could be seen to be claiming the radically naive position of the innocent artist. But how innocent is Huntley if he is able to operate in the worldly art world where he must negotiate showing at Talano Galleries in Melbourne and Art Puzzle Hong Kong? It's interesting that Huntley sings in a rock band, the original habitat of the natural man. I would suggest that Huntley positions himself as a dude, unaffected, natural, free and wild, untainted by the negativity of the art world. These two examples of contemporary Australian artists working with ceramics demonstrate how it is possible to read their practices counter to their publicity, not as innocent and vital, but as market-driven primality, a fake kind of primal. I must clarify my position here. I'm not saying that I necessarily agree with these criticisms. Because, for example, the idea of sincerity is very current among younger artists, as Sterling Ruby has pointed out in the past. However, I do believe that these arguments must be raised as part of a critical process of assessment. Primality must be understood as a term that puts ideas such as innocence and primal into question. I see these terms and the claims of the artists as yet undecided. I suggest that the fashion in contemporary art for ceramics usually manifests in lumpy objects with limited technical ambition. Barclay says the artists he discusses in his article tread the fine line of knowing good technique but not being overwhelmed by it, equal parts concert pianist and garage band. So how does Barclay feel about ceramics artists who are all concert pianist and no garage band? Maybe he feels they are no good because they are overwhelmed by good technique, not artists but technicians. Barclay briefly mentions Juz Kitson, an Australian ceramics artist who demonstrates very high technical skills, but he does not discuss her ambitious work, presumably because he feels she's all concert pianist and no garage band, and therefore not cool enough. I suspect that Barclay's issue with good technique is a hangover from de-skilled conceptualism, where concept takes precedence over material engagement. Ironically then, the lumpy modelling of clay could be argued to be more about the idea of reconnection to matter than actual reconnection, a kind of acting out of primal immersion rather than immersion itself. In this case, high technique, deriving from much more extended time spent with hands-on clay, would be a truer and deeper path to a materialist re-engagement with matter. High technique is also much more dangerous and risky a venture in the construction and firing of large-scale objects, and therefore the potential rewards from successful firing are so much greater. Small lumpy ceramics could be argued to be a safe option, and Barclay's argument could thus be read as a justification for bad technique. Here's some of that uncool thing, good technique. This is my work, built using ancient coiling method. I hope I've managed to avoid cliches of lumpy primality and produced a highly skilled work with some genuine archaic mystique and magic about it. Thank you.